Good morning. I'm Larry Tribe, Senior Counselor for Access to Justice at the U.S. Department of Justice, and I'm honored to open today's White House meeting dedicated to closing the justice gap for America's working families. Justice is quite simply the cornerstone of American democracy. The most profound aspirations of our nation's founding could not be satisfied, nor its audacious hopes realized, without meaningful access to justice for all. Access to justice is the tie that binds us all together, not just those of us in this room, but all of those across this land who take seriously America's promise to establish justice and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Whatever our disagreements in this time of contentious division, we should be able to agree that justice must be available not simply as an abstract philosophical ideal, but as an everyday reality, not just as a snapshot from 30,000 feet, but as lived experience on the ground. And though the economic winds may blow hot or cold, strong or weak, the commitment to hold the compass of justice true must set our course. In asking me to lead the Access to Justice initiative in the Justice Department, the President and the Attorney General issued a challenge that I couldn't resist: to ensure that the People's Charter I spent decades studying truly applies to all of us, including many of the people you'll meet today, people our new office has met around the country: homeowners, renters, veterans, victims of domestic violence, juveniles pleading guilty without any legal advice, people with limited resources and pressing legal needs, people for whom access to justice means the difference between keeping or losing custody of a child, between living in a safe and secure home and living on the street or in constant fear of violence. When the President and Vice President charged the Justice Department with the mission of making genuine justice not as a legal abstraction, but as a living, breathing reality, more meaningfully available to all in a time of economic distress, I realized something that I'm sure all of our dedicated justice-seeking partners in this room, from the badly underfunded and unduly restricted Legal Services Corporation to the American Bar Association and its affiliates, have learned through experience that we need to form innovative, community-based partnerships cutting across ideological divides, both within government and between government and the nonprofit and private sectors, to make the whole greater than the sum of its parts. The Access to Justice initiative has accepted that charge, and in conjunction with the Commerce Department this September, we helped facilitate the deployment of broadband technology in Washington and North Carolina to make vital resources and services, including legal services, accessible to those otherwise cut off by social and economic circumstances, physical remoteness, or both. In a similar vein, we are working with Vice President Biden's office and the Office on Violence Against Women to forge partnerships between law school clinics, legal services providers, and law firms in New Orleans and Baltimore that will dedicate the time of young associates to assisting domestic violence victims. Those efforts attack a plague that infects every community in our nation, a plague this Vice President, I think, should be praised for pursuing ever since he drafted the Violence Against Women Act a decade and a half ago. Partnerships of this sort can significantly enlarge the pool of licensed attorneys who assist not just the destitute, but the working poor and the struggling middle class, people to whom the loss of just one paycheck can mean the difference between stability and crisis. The work goes on, and yet the challenge continues. The gap in justice remains a chasm, so it's possible to look across the landscape of America and despair, to see the crisis in indigent defense and civil legal assistance as the canary in the coal mine, exposing deep fissures in our entire legal system, to focus on the shocking magnitude of the justice gap that puts both criminal and civil justice beyond the reach of nearly all but the most privileged among us, to despair that the Constitution's promise of equal justice under law, a promise emblazoned in marble in our Supreme Court and on courthouses across the land, is, in Justice Jackson's deathless phrase, a promise to the ear to be broken to the hope, like a munificent bequest in a pauper's will, to despair that justice is a hollow hope. But despair defeats possibility. We are, if nothing else, a land of endless possibility, a land that has transcended its morally flawed beginnings through a succession of profound revolutions, some of them inscribed in blood, a land whose message to the world is a message of unbounded and audacious aspiration. That message has drawn together the people in this gathering, from the private bar leaders to the dedicated public servants who have partnered with them, from the scholars and experts in the complex and varied areas of law involved, to so-called ordinary people who have demonstrated extraordinary perseverance in the face of daunting odds. And that is the message I hope all of you will draw from today's event, an event through which the Vice President and his middle-class task force, in partnership with the Access to Justice Initiative, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Labor Department, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, will announce a number of hopeful new collaborations, all designed to help bring the fair and equal opportunity that our tradition promises to those who struggle every day to make ends meet. One promising option involves creating a referral system for wage earners to more easily find competent lawyers who can vindicate their rights as workers. For veterans who have often served in multiple deployments and have put their lives on the line for their country, we will highlight new and practical ways to redeem the solemn promises our country has made to them and their families. And we'll look at ways to create effective forums where homeowners can meet with lenders to explore mutually beneficial solutions that call for the help of professionals who might not have law degrees but who have the training and the understanding to help homeowners rework loans in ways that make mutual economic sense. Now, we have no illusion that these collaborations will alone transform our national landscape into one of equal justice under law. The task we confront together is much too large for that to be a realistic expectation. It took a village to make even this event a reality, and we will have much village building to do across this country if we are to make lasting progress. But a journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step. And the steps we announce here today will make a significant difference in the lives of many who struggle to lead decent and healthy lives. And as the progress we make teaches us more about what works and what doesn't, about when just results can at the same time be economic and cost-saving results, we'll be moving our nation closer toward what our founders knew we could become, that city on a hill that can inspire and in the end can transform the entire globe. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great privilege and honor to turn the podium over to the man whose leadership has made this extraordinary gathering and much else in our lives possible, the great Vice President of the United States and my very good friend, Joe Biden.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks. Please sit down. Let me start off by saying it's so good to see you, Maxine, Representative Maxine Waters, who is here today, and John Conyers, who may be coming, but my good friend John and Representative Bob Filner is here, as well as Representative-elect, former office holder, who now has jumped into the cauldron as our new congressman, David Cicilline, Rhode Island, and my good friend, Chief Justice Broderick from the state of New Hampshire, an old, close personal friend, and a person who is not a lawyer, but I cannot go without acknowledging her presence here, one of my closest friends, Mary Carey Foley. Mary, you down here to straighten him out a little bit? Keep him alive? Well, that's good. Well, and me, see that? And me. You can tell she's a good friend, Maxine. That's what Maxine's been trying to do for years with me. She's been working hard on me. It's great to see you all, to have such a distinguished group here. Folks, before I begin, let me, I often get asked, you know, do I, in all the interviews over the years, do I have any regrets? And one of the regrets, all my Harvard Law School friends like Barack asked me, do I regret not going to Harvard? I say, no, I don't regret not going to Harvard. Because quite frankly, law school, I received my law degree from Syracuse University, and I got the best of both worlds. I got more Larry Tribe than you got at Harvard, and I got a degree from Syracuse. I just want to tell you something, and it's not part of the script here, but it warrants saying. Larry Tribe will go down in history as one of the 2 or 3 most profound and thoughtful commentators on American constitutional law in the entire 20th century. This is a guy who has a prodigious mind, has made has influenced more legal minds who are now conducting on both left and right the business of the nation in the courts and in every other arena than about any man I know. And since this job, he's heading back to Harvard as a professor, and we were able to steal him this long for next semester, and he will no longer be in this job. I want to publicly acknowledge the indebtedness I feel and the President feels to Professor Larry Tribe, one of the great minds in this country. I have one other regret, that he's not on the Supreme Court of the United States of America for the last 20 years. But that's another question. That's another time. Folks, one of the principles of American government, going all the way back to John Adams, the first man to hold my job, is that trite expression that sounds today, we use it so often, that America is a nation of laws. Our nation is a nation where every American, regardless of their age, their race, their sex, their income, is by law treated the exact same, or should be treated the exact same, in the eyes of the law. That, in a nutshell, is the fundamental ideal of our democracy, But it's not enough, as Professor Tribe has pointed out, it's not enough to say that that everyone has the same legal rights as saying that everyone actually has equal rights to justice. There's a disconnect here sometimes, as Professor Tribe pointed out. So in order to protect these rights, we have to ensure that every American has real and meaningful access to justice. And sadly, as I've observed over my 36 years in the United States Senate, we are still struggling. We're still struggling to make that a reality. We're not just talking about a lack of access for poor folks here. It's becoming, and has been, I would argue, for the last 25 years, an increasing problem for hardworking middle-class Americans to receive access to justice, particularly civil justice. Middle-class Americans are struggling to make ends meet, and they have real legal issues, but increasingly they can't afford to deal with those legal issues in a way that gets them the full benefit of the law. The statistics are staggering. In many states, well over half of the civil cases have at least one party with no legal representation. Over half the civil cases. And as I said, this problem isn't new. As chairman of the Judiciary Committee for 17 years, as ranking member, we constantly tried to chip away at that dilemma. You know, an old judge famously remarked, "Justice is open to everyone in the same way as the Ritz Hotel." Well, the fact of the matter is it's true, and all of you in this room, better than most Americans, know that to be the case. But the economic crisis has only made the problem worse, with 60% of the judges in the United States reporting that they had more unrepresented litigants last year than the year before. The complexity of the legal problems facing many families, all of the paperwork, all the complicated legal rules, it requires trained professionals. And Americans, average Americans who can't afford trained professionals, simply aren't getting a fair shake in the system. And this administration, and the reason why the President asked Professor Tribe to do this administration is dedicated to doing something about it. This administration really does understand the magnitude of the problem. And as Larry said, we're not going to change it overnight, but we are determined. We're determined to continue to chip away at this inequity. We know the difference it makes when any family facing a life-altering circumstance has a legal advocate at their side. So to tackle these challenges head-on, the President created, as you already know, the new Access to Justice Initiative, led by Professor Tribe. Larry, the President, was absolutely certain in picking Larry that he was selecting one of the nation's most respected law professors, an appellate advocate, someone who's dedicated his entire life to studying and defending the Constitution, and who's now tasked with making its lofty promise to establish justice an on-the-ground reality for every American. And thanks to the hard work of Larry and his remarkable team at the Justice Department, the Department of Justice, along with the partners throughout the government and many of you representing the entire legal community, I'm proud to be able to announce concrete steps that we're taking toward that goal of equal access to justice in 3 areas: protecting workers' rights, helping veterans cope with legal challenges, and promoting common sense solutions with regard to foreclosures. Now, I'm going to talk very little about each of these, but I do want to mention them, and you'll hear more during the panel discussions later today. First, we're taking steps to help workers stand up for their rights in the workplace. And by the way, when, in fact, the workplace is so constricted and constrained and unemployment is so high, there's even a greater reluctance on the part of workers to seek and accommodate and to have their rights accommodated. Over many decades, we put in place critical protections for workers, ones that everyone knows about and some they don't know about, like minimum wage and overtime laws, which everybody knows about. But every year, tens of thousands of workers file complaints to the Department of Labor because they have been denied those basic rights that are guaranteed to them in law. The Department of Labor does an incredible job working to deal with these violations or allegations of violation, investigating nearly 30,000 cases every year and resolving the vast majority of them. Unfortunately, because of the lack of resources at the department, there are still thousands of cases it can't pursue. And the workers filing these claims typically don't know where else to go, don't know where else to turn for help. They know they haven't been treated fairly, but they don't know how to go about it. I used to have a friend who was a great basketball player, went to Providence College. God love him, he's passed away, and he used to say, you know, you got to know how to know. You got to know how to know. They know their rights have been violated, but they don't know. They don't know how to navigate the system to get them redressed. And thanks to a new collaboration between the Department of Labor and the American Bar Association, workers whose cases can't be pursued are going to be provided with a new toll-free number that links them to an attorney referral service, so that if you are wrongly denied overtime pay or paid less than the minimum wage, you can call this number, and if there's a participating attorney in your area, and that's what the Bar Association are going to work on to make sure there is a participating attorney in every area, you're going to be able to be put in touch with a lawyer who can help you with your case and with your claim in a way that's affordable. Most of it, and the average person is, what do you mean by affordable? Most of all of this will be contingency. It's on the back end. So they're going to be in a position where the folks don't have to reach in a pocket and come out of pocket money, out of pocket with the money to get the case started, which many are not in a position to be able to do. And that can make a real difference. Just ask Mitchell, who you'll hear from later today. He tried on his own to get his employer to give him the overtime he was due, but he was having a lot of trouble doing it on his own. As soon as he got a lawyer, though, he started making progress and was able to quickly settle the case. The second thing we're doing here is we're taking steps to connect our veterans with the legal help they need, deserve, and they are entitled to. These veterans have made a sacrifice unlike anyone else in the country. Right now, by the way, we've had 2 million forces, combat forces, cycle through. both Afghanistan and Iraq. Many of them have come back with significant difficulties they're facing. This nation owes them not only a huge debt of gratitude, it owes them more. Colleagues in the Congress have heard me say this. We have a lot of obligations. We only have one truly sacred obligation, and that's to prepare those who we send, give them everything they need to do their job, and when they come home, meet their legitimate needs. And so there's no more basic need that you'd think would be automatic than making sure they have access to what they're legally entitled to. Although the Department of Veterans Affairs provides veterans the treatment, counseling, and benefits, they often face legal challenges alone and without any strong advocate. You'll hear from David, who was seriously injured while he was serving in the United States Army. Thankfully, he recovered and worked full-time for 15 years until pain from his Army injury forced him to retire. The VA did its job. It provided him with all the benefits he had earned under the various pieces of legislation and recommended, though, that he go out and seek disability, Social Security disability. He tried unsuccessfully to do so on his own for 10 years. Finally, with the help of a legal advocate, he was finally able to organize all the documentation he needed and get the benefits to which he was entitled. So I'm happy to announce that a new collaboration that will help veterans get their legal help they need is in the works. The communities across the country, VA vet centers already provide mental health and other counseling services to combat veterans. Well, we're now connecting more than 50 of these vet centers with the Legal Services Corporation networks of the local legal aid offices, which provide free legal advice to folks who can't afford to hire a lawyer to pursue what they're entitled to. So when veterans come to the vet centers and they need legal help, their staffs will now know exactly where to pursue them. And by the way, I know this from the Violence Against Women Act and all the work I've done over the years. You literally have to connect a person with a person. When I used to do this work as a United States Senator and have a staff devoted to nothing but dealing with these needs, as my friends in Congress can tell you, literally thousands of them over the years, one thing I instruct my staff to do, don't give them a phone number. Don't give them a phone number. You work for them. You pick up the phone. You call the agency for which you're being referred. You get a name. You tell them that Mary Smith, your constituent, is going to come and see them, and you expect their problem to be resolved. Well, not everyone can get to the United States Senator or the United States Congressperson, which they do a lot of. But when you have legal counsel, you have legal counsel. This is a frightening prospect for people. We all are in this room have legal backgrounds and professional backgrounds. So it's no big deal for us to think to pick up the phone and call and demand we have access to what we're entitled to. But it is a frightening prospect for a lot of people. They don't know how to go about it. But once you have someone, in this case, the Legal Services Corporation, launching a new website specifically for veterans and their families that's going to explain how to find this legal help with information about everything from estate planning to the GI Bill, things will change. At least that is our expectation. And if it doesn't, we're going to find out why it hasn't changed. And the third thing we're talking about here is we're taking steps to strengthen foreclosure mediation. Look, coming from a family where when there was a recession, you knew at dinner your uncles or aunts or your father or mother or their friends sitting around the dining room table that one of them was likely to lose their job. A lot of us never have to worry. We've never had to worry in our life about losing a job, and consequently never had to worry about losing the house. It is the most frightening prospect any man or woman can face in trying to provide for their family. And through no fault of their own, there are millions of people whose mortgages, as you all know the expression, are underwater. They paid their mortgages every single month, never fell behind. But because of two subprime mortgages that were around the block that went under, all of a sudden they found their house was worth 20% less than it was before they bought their house. All of a sudden they find they owe more on their mortgage than their house is worth. And they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. They're not mortgage bankers. They're not people who, even though they're well-educated and knowledgeable, this is not an area they're they feel comfortable in, but they're losing their home. In many cases, there are alternatives to foreclosures that benefit not only the homeowner, but the lender, would benefit the lender as well. But all too often, these alternatives are not just overlooked, they're unknown to the person being foreclosed on. Well, foreclosure mediation programs can help these homeowners find alternatives by providing them with an opportunity to meet face-to-face with a lender and discuss options under the supervision of a neutral third-party mediator. Now, by the way, the reason of a neutral third-party mediator is not just to be fair and mediate, but is also able to translate into English or into language that's understood in everyday language what it is they should be asking for, what it is the options are available to them. Back to my old friend Pete, you got to know how to know. You got to know what to ask for. That's what's happened to Richard and Phyllis, who are also here today. When Richard lost his job, they were having trouble making the payments on their home. But because of Cayuga County in Ohio provided them access to counseling and mediation, they were able to sit down with a lender, with a knowledgeable person with them, and negotiate a modification of their mortgage that benefited the lender as well as allowed them to stay in their home. And the entire community benefited as a consequence of it. So today, the Housing Department, the Housing and Urban Development, is joining with Access to Justice Initiative to issue a report on mediation strategies that are working, and go out and sell this to communities like Cayuga County has, to communities across the country to take a close look at, we can't dictate them, but have them take a close look at these strategies so they can learn from them and maybe replicate them. That's one of the things we can do at a federal level. And again, if you're able to mediate these mortgages, it not only helps the homeowner and the lender, it helps the entire community. There's one less house going under and one less click in the devaluation of the property in a whole block. So look, these little things mean a lot. They make a big difference. And the Department of Housing and Urban Development and NeighborWorks, which is an organization, the nation's largest funder of foreclosure counseling services, will be providing new training for housing counselors, homeowners, attorneys, and mediators that are going to help make this mediation program much more effective. And I can't think of any other more urgent need in terms of the economy now than that. Look, we're not naive, as Professor Tribe pointed out. We know the steps we're taking now to solve this problem are helpful, but we're not going to solve this overnight. There's a long, long way to go. And these steps certainly don't represent the administration's full response to the many challenges relating to the foreclosure mess or the other things that I've mentioned. But these steps we're taking today do what the Middle Class Task Force was set up to do when the President asked me to head up this force. He said, go out and find those things. Force every department in the federal government to find those things they could do, they could change, they could alter, they could emphasize, that would actually have an impact on how middle-class people really live their lives. How do you take pressure off the middle class that has been so burdened? You know, Alexander Hamilton said once that the first duty of society is justice. We throw that word around a lot, justice. But if you don't have access to it, if you don't know how it works, if you don't know how to take advantage of what you're entitled to, that other great phrase, you know, in a different context, it was about crime, but justice delayed is justice denied. You know, it matters to people, and they don't know. And by the way, most people are like my dad was. My dad is a guy who never wanted to ask for anything. My dad only said he didn't expect government to solve his problem, but he expected at least the government to understand his problem. This is about understanding a basic part of human nature where people are working 10, 12 hours a day just to put meat and potatoes on the table or put food on the table. This is not something, and they're self-conscious about asking. People don't want to let you know that they don't know. And so, folks, you know, our job is to fulfill this solemn duty of making sure people have access to justice. And that's what I was tasked with. That's what Larry Tribe was tasked with and is doing. And together, we're working to give middle-class Americans and those who aspire to the middle class what they so need and so deserve, a system of justice that works for them and not against them, that's accommodating, that is welcoming, instead of throwing up barriers or inadvertently throwing up, you know, that expression we use in trade, non-tariff trade barriers. You know, well, there's a lot of essentially non-tariff trade barriers in the legal system because people don't even know sometimes how to navigate what they know they need to get done. And so that's why I think we owe such a debt of gratitude to Larry and his organization that was set up under his leadership. And that's why the President and I owe such a debt of gratitude to all of you that are sitting here today. Now, I know you're going to have panels here. I know you're going to discuss a number of these things in much more detail. But I just wanted to open up by telling you that a lot of you have done significant things in your life. And many of you may think, well, wait, you know, this is not going to, you know, relight the whole world here. So is this that important? It's one family at a time. It's one person at a time. It's one veteran at a time. It's one foreclosure at a time. If we do what we're saying here, if we're able to implement this, you're going to affect the lives of tens of thousands and millions of people in ways that are consequential, because a lot of them are lost right now. A lot of them are lost right now. And the pressure is building on them economically, and giving them this access is, as someone once said, a big deal. Thank God my mother wasn't around. So Larry, Professor Tribe, thank you for your great work. Thank all of you for being here today. And now I'd like to turn the podium back to Larry for you to get down to the real work. But on behalf of the President, and by the way, I was just about to do that. You see that big guy from South Carolina, Bobby? He just handed me a note. He said, Bobby Scott's here. The first guy I looked at was Bobby, and because I nodded him while Congressman Scott, I nodded to him while Larry was speaking, and I guess subconsciously thought by that I already introduced you. But Bobby Scott and I have been in the vineyards for a long time, and the Judiciary Committee in the House and the Senate. You're a great champion for all we're talking about here, Bobby. Thank you very much for being here. And is there anything else I forgot? No, I don't think there's anything else I forgot except to turn it back to Larry Tribe. And again, I was talking to the President earlier today. Thank you on behalf of the President of the United States as well. This is something he feels passionately about. So thank you for what you're doing. Okay?
That was beautiful, Dad.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Bobby, Merry Christmas.
Now you know why I think he's such a great vice president. The Workers' Rights Panel, I think, ought to assemble. We're turning now to our program, and at a time when a single paycheck can determine whether a middle-class worker can make ends meet. We're turning first to the issue of workers' rights. A fair day's pay for a fair day's work was the call of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt when the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed in 1938. And yet today, more than 70 years later, workers in America have hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars stolen from them, literally stolen, when they don't get the wages to which they're legally entitled. Maybe they don't get the minimum wage. Maybe they don't get their overtime pay or their family medical leave. Maybe they're treated as independent contractors when they should be receiving the benefits of regular employees. In perilous economic times, workers fear losing their jobs if they ask about the wages they're owed. That's a point the Vice President underscored. And they often don't know how to find a lawyer to help them out. They don't know how to know. And so they're robbed of the money their hard work merits. In the words of that Woody Guthrie song, some rob you with a 6-gun, some with a fountain pen. Today, the U.S. Department of Labor and the American Bar Association announced an unprecedented collaboration to help workers obtain legal redress for their minimum wage, overtime, and family medical leave claims. Workers whose complaints won't be resolved by the Department of Labor will be given information about any investigation that's been done on their case and be informed about a new toll-free number provided by the ABA that'll connect them with local qualified attorneys who can help in an affordable way. With us today to announce this partnership are the U.S. Secretary of Labor, Hilda Solis, the President-elect of the ABA, William Robinson III, and joining them will be Mitchell Green, a worker who didn't receive the overtime pay to which he was entitled until he got legal help. He knows what difference access to an attorney can make. Also joining us is Catherine Ruckelshaus, legal co-director of the National Employment Law Project, which advances labor standards for all workers. I also want to recognize in our audience representatives of many bar associations across the country who've linked arms to bring this collaboration to life and bring justice to workers, and the many representatives of workers' centers, unions, and advocacy groups who labor every day to try to ensure that workers get that fair day's pay for a fair day's work. And now we will hear from Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Tribe, for convening us and the work that you do with access to justice and helping to bring us all together in this partnership that we're beginning today. With your help, today we're ensuring more workers have access to justice. And I want to personally thank our outstanding Vice President Joe Biden for his leadership and his commitment to American workers and their families. He, as you know, is our champion. And I would also like to thank Attorney General Eric Holder for his commitment to protecting and enforcing our nation's laws and for his dedication to working families. Thank you, William T. Robinson, President-elect of the American Bar Association, representing various state and local attorneys and referral providers. Our agency, DOL, is so excited and pleased to be working with you and with your colleagues that are here with us today. I know many of them traveled very far to be here, and I appreciate that. Kathy Ruckelshaus with NELP, I want to also thank you and for all the advocates who have joined us today and for your tireless efforts in advocating for workers' rights. And I also want to recognize and thank my solicitor at the Department of Labor, Patricia Smith, who is here. And also I want to recognize Nancy Lempick, the Deputy Administrator of the Wage and Hour Division, for their tireless work to make today possible for us. And finally, I want to thank Mitchell Green for his coming and sharing his story with us today. He has stood up for himself, but he's also stood up for many other workers to set an example. So we will hear more from him later. Workers across this country continue to struggle to obtain basic employment protections under our nation's minimum wage and overtime laws. And during difficult economic times, every dollar that workers are entitled to is even more important. Helping these workers is one of the highest priorities that we have at the Department of Labor. And since I've taken office, the department has collected more than $300 million in back wages for more than 385,000 workers. I have hired an additional 300 new wage and hour investigators to ensure that we can promptly respond to complaints and can undertake more targeted enforcement. And I have launched, and I am very proud of this program, a national public awareness campaign. We call it We Can Help. In Spanish, Podremos Ayudar. To connect America's most vulnerable workers with the broad array of services that are provided by my department to ensure they receive the wages they've worked so hard to earn. We're making progress after years of neglect at the Department of Labor. We are back in the enforcement business. But even these increases just take us back to 2001 levels. Thankfully, there are lawyers and advocates in this room today and around the country who stepped up in the years when workers could not turn to the Department of Labor, and who continue now to work with us in this critical effort. In a typical year, over 35,000 workers contact the Wage and Hour Division for help. That includes 25,000 who need assistance with their minimum wage, overtime, or family medical leave claims. The Wage and Hour Division is able to help the vast majority of these workers recover denied wages or lost jobs through conciliation, settlement, or with the help of the Solicitor of Labor litigation. But unfortunately, every year there are thousands upon thousands of workers whose claims we cannot resolve because of limited capacity. And truthfully, we know there are many more workers who need to be calling the Department of Labor. So this is only a fraction of the need. We recognize we cannot remedy every violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act and the Family Medical Leave Act. That is why Congress provided workers with their own private right of action under these laws. In the past, the Wage and Hour Division would inform workers that even though they may have valid claims under FLSA or FMLA, it was declining to pursue their claims further because they did not have the capacity to assist them. Attempting to exercise their rights on their own or finding an attorney with the necessary experience and subject matter expertise to represent them are significant and difficult obstacles for any worker looking to obtain justice. That is why today's announcement is so critical for American workers. Thanks to our new collaboration between the Wage and Hour Division and the American Bar Association Standing Committee on Lawyer Referral and Information Service, we will now be able to connect these workers to a local referral service that will provide workers with access to attorneys who may be able to help them. Beginning on December the 13th, when an FSLA and FMLA complainant is informed that the Wage and Hour Division is declining to pursue their complaint, they will also be given a toll-free number to contact the newly created ABA-approved attorney referral system. A worker will be able to call and connect with an ABA-approved attorney referral provider in his or her area and gain assistance if he or she chooses in retaining a qualified private sector attorney. This phone system will be available, and I'm very proud to say this, both in English and Spanish. In addition, when Wage and Hour Division has conducted an investigation, the complainant will now be provided information about violations at issue and back wages owed. This information will be given to the complainants in the same letter informing them that the Wage and Hour Division will not be pursuing further action, which will be very useful for attorneys who take on these cases. The Wage and Hour Division has also developed a special process for complainants and representing attorneys to quickly obtain certain relevant case information and documents when available. It is with these types of partnerships that we will be able to provide workers and their families with the protections they need to secure their wages. Ensuring that workers in this country are paid for their hard work is what the Department of Labor is doing every single day. You know, I will not rest until we ensure every worker gets their protections he or she deserves. To workers, we can say, we can help. To you, I say, we need your help. It's a partnership like this that shows us by using creative solutions to work together, we can expand our capacity to help all workers, especially vulnerable workers. I thank you all for what you are representing here today, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, Professor Tribe, fellow panelists, and honored guests. This is an exciting day for the American Bar Association. As has been said so eloquently here this morning, we are at the crossroads of partnership and access to justice. What an exciting day, a day of commitment, a day of celebration. The Secretary, Professor Tribe, emphasized so well how partnership is the key to the success that we are going to achieve here today. But partnership, to be successful, requires leadership. And we at the American Bar Association, our president, Steve Zack, who's on the road for the rule of law today, I, in his stead as the president-elect, and our nearly 400,000 members want to pay our respect and appreciation to the President, the Vice President, Professor Tribe in the Department of Justice, and the Secretary in the Department of Labor for their leadership that assures that this partnership will be successful and will increase access to justice. One of the strengths of the American Bar Association, which counts among its core values access to justice, without which the rule of law is meaningless. One of our core strengths is our ability to convene, to bring together lawyers from throughout this country to serve the American public in an organized, coordinated way. I want to assure you that we will again demonstrate our ability to do this and to make progress in this innovative, creative, and dedicated way. I want to especially recognize today the representatives that we have here from bar associations across this country who are stepping up to assure the success of today's announced initiative. We have representatives from the bar associations here today of Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago, Milwaukee, Columbus, Atlanta, Tampa, Philadelphia, New York City, and I'm happy to say my home state of Kentucky. We are proud to be here. We, as lawyers, are privileged to be here, and we thank you for this opportunity to partner with you. Thank you very much.
First, I'd like to give honor to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, from whom all of my blessings flow. Hello, my name is Mitchell Green. I'm one of America's workers. I've worked for hourly wages since the age of 15, starting in the fast food industry as a teen and onto the banking industry on Wall Street as an adult. I chose to leave the security of a steady paycheck and healthcare to pursue my passion as a professional actor. Early in that transition, I had to work many survival jobs, at times living paycheck to paycheck to make ends meet. One of my survival jobs was as a loss prevention officer, and I can tell you that the playing field is not level, that the so-called justice gap is deep, wide, and cavernous, and in many cases insurmountable for the American worker who are just trying to get their fair share in the marketplace. And what I mean by fair share is payment for hourly living wage for all hours worked, and most importantly for my story, getting overtime pay for overtime work. As a loss prevention officer working long hours in one of America's largest and most successful retail chains, Abercrombie & Fitch, I and other Abercrombie workers in their flagship store were denied payment of our overtime hours. When I inquired about the lack of overtime pay in my checks, I was informed incorrectly by my supervisor that since I received a salary, I did not qualify for overtime. I knew instantly this was wrong, but I had to choose between getting fair wages and getting no wages. It was understood that complainers were soon unemployed. I was stonewalled in my efforts to receive what I was due, but because of my faith in God, I fear no man or Goliath retail chain. I filed a claim in small claims court to retrieve my back overtime pay. I was concerned that even if I won, my coworkers would still be mistreated and cheated out of money. Fortunately, I had a friend who was an attorney at William McGillivray, one of the top 5 FLSA firms in America. Within days of contacting them, Greg McGillivray and attorneys from his firm came to New York City, met with my colleagues and I, and interviewed us about our job duties and quickly confirmed my belief that as loss prevention officers, we did not fall into any exemptions from overtime laws of America. I'm sorry, I'm talking fast. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to slow down. I'm talking fast. I'm going to say, in America, the most basic, fundamental, fair labor standard is that when you work, we get paid. And when we work overtime, we're entitled to get paid a premium for working long hours. It's that simple. Apparently, however, employers large and small all over America, all over this country, violate this basic principle. They increase the justice gap in America by working employees long hours and denying them their due wages. Unfortunately, the average American doesn't have access to a prestigious law firm like I did. Within days of hiring private counsel, a lawsuit was filed on my behalf and on behalf of Abercrombie workers similarly situated to me. Within days of filing suit, a settlement was negotiated With my and other employees' approval, we received a check for our damages soon thereafter. Importantly, once our lawyers checked the employer on their blatant wage violation, the employer did the right thing and not only made the plaintiffs in the lawsuit whole, but also they changed its pay practices. I just wrote this like 3 o'clock in the morning. I kid you not. I was up till 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know this, okay? Okay? I'm sorry. I wish I had more time to memorize it, but, you know, I was reading this on the way over here. Employers did the right thing and not only made the plaintiffs in the lawsuit whole, but also changed its pay practices so that in the future, its loss prevention officers would be paid properly for overtime hours under the FLSA. I just want to say also, before I close, that when I was working there, when I was pursuing justice, I was taunted and ridiculed by management at Abercrombie. I was mocked. They conspired together to ask me every day, how is your acting career coming? You know, every day I would come in and they would all stop me and say, how your acting career coming? It was their joke. And I ignored it, but I just want to say for them, in case they're looking, that Abercrombie this was 5 years ago. That was the last job that I ever needed. I've been a professional actor working only acting jobs since then, and many of you have seen me and not realized it. So, and I want to give credit to God for that, because the Bible says He will supply my every need according to His riches and glory, and I haven't had a need since I've given my total life to Him. In closing, I would like to thank Vice President Biden, Secretary Solis, Attorney General Holder, and Senior Counsel for Access to Justice, Lawrence Tribe, for allowing me to tell my story, for their efforts to close the justice gap that exists for American workers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I think if the acting career doesn't peak, you might consider a writing career as well. Kathy?
Hi, I'm Kathy Ruckelshaus, and I'm from the National Employment Law Project. We're a national nonprofit based in New York, and we work with low-income workers and the unemployed. We also work with a range of advocates working on wage justice issues, state departments of labor, academics, workers, unions, and other worker centers who are seeing every day workers like Mr. Green who aren't paid properly. So why is this program significant to the vast number of workers who aren't being paid? First is that there are high number of violations of our nation's core workplace standards. NELP did a 3-city survey of low-wage workers that was issued last year that found staggering numbers of underpaid workers. 26% of the workers surveyed had not been paid the minimum wage the previous week, and 76% had not been paid overtime the previous week. That's bad for workers and their families. This survey showed that $56.4 million a week weren't paid to these workers just in those 3 cities. That's also bad for law-abiding employers who can't compete when they're underbid by employers who cheat their workers. And it's bad for the economy because wages aren't circulating in the economy, payroll taxes aren't being paid, and there's less consumer spending generally, and money just isn't circulating. And it also means that, unfortunately, we have a culture of non-compliance in what are supposed to be our growth industries, the service industries, like the industry where Mr. Green worked. There's also including healthcare, retail, construction, janitorial, and all other service sectors where the wages are low. So how can we fix this? This program brings together 2 and potentially all 4 of the primary players in the wage justice enforcement scheme. The 4 players are the United States Department of Labor, where Secretary Solis and her Secretary of Labor, Patricia Smith, and the Wage and Hour Division Chief Nancy LePink have been turning the Titanic around to get wage justice back in the forefront of our country. It is the key enforcer of our bedrock employment laws, wage laws, and it enforces all of them with approximately 1,200 investigators across the country. These investigators are trying and are doing a good job of protecting approximately 87.7 million covered workers. The second pillar of our enforcement are the state DOLs, and there are state departments of labor. They're another important player, and the exciting thing is that a lot of the state departments of labor are looking to this referral program and will perhaps replicate it in the states. That could then leverage a wonderful model in the states. But state enforcement only has about 1,000 enforcement across our nation. Again, it's not enough. The private bar, which Mr. Robinson is excited to say is a partner in this, has become a critical partner and a check on the culture of lawlessness. The private bar has developed an important expertise and has helped to keep the finger in the dike against the wage theft onslaught. And this includes private attorneys, legal services attorneys, and union attorneys who have really stepped up and become real experts in wage justice and wage and hour laws and have done important cases to send a message to employers. And the final piece is the private worksite monitoring that labor unions and worker centers are doing from inside the workplaces where they are active and organizing. They are helping to enforce our nation's wage and hour laws. They don't have enough capacity either to do this. So the main message about these 4 enforcers is that none of us can do this alone. We need all 4 players firing on all pistons, and this project brings together 2 of them in a strong and strategic collaboration, and we think it has the potential to bring all 4 together to make a dent in this kind of wage justice problem. So what's next for this program? This is our hopes for the next phase for this program, and I urge the Secretary of Labor and the Access to Justice program to work with us and others to help make this hit the ground running and really have an institutionalized long-term impact. The first thing is to monitor this program and see what happens, track the impacts. We'll help publicize it, we should report on it, and get the word out that this program is around. We want to continue to reach out to the stakeholder experts like the worker centers and the unions and get the pipeline going, get more workers coming in. The better the job that the Department of Labor does, and it is doing an incredible job just these last 2 years, the more workers are going to come to the Department of Labor, which means more people are going to need help, and we need more collaborations like this one. So we hope that the states will replicate it and more bar associations will sign up and sign on. Finally, we should use this strategically to divide and conquer. The Department of Labor is good at being strategic and targeted, and the private bar is good at being dogged and consistent and will leverage its strength with the Department of Labor's strategic strength, and we can really have a powerful impact. Yesterday in New York City, Patricia Smith, the Solicitor of Labor, told a group talking about independent contractors that it's hard to change a culture of lawlessness, a culture where violations prevail. I think this program will help to change the culture and to stop the persistent violations of wage theft and bring us onward where we can have a real enforcement force in our country. And we really thank Professor Tribe and Secretary Solis and the ABA for your leadership on this. Thank you.
There's really about 3 minutes or so that we can take for brief questions from the audience while the panel still is here and before the next panel comes up. So if you have a question, there's a roving mic, I understand. Just identify yourself and please make it a brief question if you can.
how will these
Please
lawyer-
identify yourself at the outset.
Yeah, Michael Terry, President of the Atlanta Bar. How will these lawyer referral services relate to the ABA-approved lawyer referral services that many of us already have up and running? Is this going to be a different service, or will it be appended to what we already have?
My understanding is that we're going to take advantage of and rely upon the lawyer referral networks that we already have in place. And I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment here and recognize that within the American Bar Association, in addition to partnership between our 27 different sections, we also need leadership to make something like this a reality. And I want to recognize the Labor and Employment Law section of the American Bar Association, which played such a strong leadership role in helping to make this happen. But they, working with the Department of Labor, primarily on the point for us, will be interrelating with our lawyer referral services across the country to make sure that for each client in search of a lawyer, there will be a lawyer ready to provide, how did the Vice President put it, what that client needs to know and how to use the know. So we're ready. We thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for the question.
Another question? Okay, it's my pleasure to thank Secretary Solis and the panel, and now invite the Veterans panel to come up. Thank you all. Well, we're going to turn next to the part of our program that focuses on increasing access to justice for our veterans and their families. It's obviously fitting that this announcement comes so soon after Veterans Day, a day that we pause to honor the brave women and men who serve our country and ensure our liberties. Throughout the history of this nation, but especially over the past decade, that service has required enormous sacrifice. For too many veterans, both those that have fought in most recent times and those who have served in decades past, the transition to civilian life often includes almost insurmountable challenges: complex legal issues, problems of family law, custody disputes, employment disputes, credit, fair lending matters, domestic violence matters, as well as securing needed benefits for themselves and their families. These are issues that are of vital importance to our veterans, and that the Department of Veterans Affairs works hard to address every day through their community-based vet centers, which provide readjustment counseling services to veterans and their families. With us today to tell us more about what steps are being taken to address these legal needs as part of our burgeoning efforts is the General Counsel of the Department of Veterans Affairs, Will Gunn, and the chairman of the LSC board, John Levy. Joining them is David Gemut, a veteran who struggled for years to get the Social Security benefits to which he was entitled, a struggle that ended quite successfully with the help of an advocate from the Legal Aid Society of Eastern Virginia, an LSC grantee. David and his family know what a difference the help of an advocate can make. I'd also like to recognize in our audience today representatives from the VA Readjustment Counseling Services and the LSC grantees, who are our real boots on the ground, who've already begun offering those crucial services. David, I'm looking forward to hearing your story, and I thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you. It is truly a pleasure to be with you today, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to tell my story. I joined the Army in 1975, and after completing a tour of stateside as an advanced individual training instructor, I was assigned to Germany. I was teaching a soldier how to drive a self-propelled howitzer when he suddenly downshifted, throwing me off the vehicle. I landed flat on my back and realized that I had no feeling from the waist down and could not move. Fortunately, my paralysis was only temporary. I recovered after a hospital stay and was able to continue to serve. After being discharged, I went to work as a correctional officer and served in the New York State prison system for about 15 years. Back pain was something I had learned to live with, but my condition became progressively worse. Apparently, I had a bulging disc and was later diagnosed of having a degenerative disc disease caused by an injury to the back. I started having trouble walking and standing and was afraid I might be paralyzed. After leaving the stresses of my law enforcement career, which accelerated my condition, I moved to Virginia to be near family. It was there that I first sought help from the VA. The VA took care of me. I saw several doctors, including active duty military doctors. I was given prescription drugs and given physical therapy. The VA determined I was 100% disabled. My VA counselor recommended that I apply for Social Security disability insurance benefits. I first tried to apply by myself, but without any luck, my repeated requests went nowhere. Then the VA suggested that I seek help from legal services, and I got in touch with the Norfolk Legal Aid Office, answered questions during intake, and got a call within a week or so asking me to come in. Linda Jones Bailey at Legal Services became my guardian angel. She reviewed my files. She put my documents in order. She got into the details. I didn't know her from Adam, but she knew the law. And the next thing I knew, the Social Security Administrative Law Judge had ruled in my favor. If it wasn't for legal services, I would be here as a veteran struggling to make ends meet and without hope for the future. Because of the VA and legal services, my wife and I have been able to adopt 2 children, ages 4 and 6, and get them out of foster care. The benefits provided to me made the adoption possible. My wife has been able to go back to school and is now studying for her CPA. I feel that I have served my country well while in the military. I now want to do what I can to help troubled young people get their lives in order. The VA and legal services have given me my future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tribe, and thank you, David, for your service. Distinguished guests, I'm Will Gunn, General Counsel for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I bring you greetings this morning on behalf of the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Secretary Eric K. Shinseki. Secretary Shinseki's #1 priority is ending homelessness among veterans over the course of the next 5 years. 2 years ago, a survey indicated that approximately 135,000 veterans were on the streets of this nation homeless any given night. We're making progress. Last year, there were 107,000 veterans on the streets of this nation. But ladies and gentlemen, I know that you'll agree with me that that is entirely unacceptable, that those that have served this nation are homeless and without resources. That's why I'm thrilled that this initiative, the Equal Justice Initiative, is placing a focus on veterans. And I'm also excited about the initiative today that John is going to tell you about with respect to the work of the Legal Services Corporation. Last week at an event, First Lady Michelle Obama stated, ending homelessness for veterans and their families will require all segments of our communities to work together. This is an issue that I will say there's good news aspects and there's bad news. First of all, the good news. we're at a much better state today than we were during the Vietnam era. When I first entered the Air Force Academy, when we had a time in this country where people were reluctant to even wear their uniform on the streets because many people took out their distaste for the war on veterans. Fortunately, that's not the case today. So we have many individuals and we have many organizations, including those included in this room, who are focused and want to know what they can do to serve veterans. The good news, we have many law schools that are opening veterans law clinics. The ABA has a military pro bono project that's focused on providing services to those veterans who are still in uniform. And we also have some of the LSC grantee organizations that are providing representation to veterans who are seeking their benefits before the Board of Veterans Appeals, as well as before the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. That's good news. There are people that are focused on that. But where are the gaps? One of the primary gaps is in the area of providing personal legal assistance for veterans. There's a tremendous need for veterans who cannot meet their needs, cannot meet their legal needs. So they need you, they need your organizations. In addition to that, I want to tell you about one key thing about individuals making a difference. In January of 2008, Judge Robert Russell from Buffalo, New York, opened this nation's first Veterans Treatment Court. He did that because he had been an advocate and participated in various treatment courts, such as drug treatment courts and also mental health treatment courts over the years. He'd also been associated with an organization, a National Association of Drug Court Professionals. An interesting history, because of course, in that, if you know anything about that movement, the drug court movement is only about 20 years old. 20 years ago, drug courts opened for the first time in South Florida and also in the Bay Area of San Francisco. Today, there are more than 2,000 drug courts in operation. Even though the first Veterans Treatment Court opened just a little less than 3 years ago, today there are 43 courts in operation at locations around the country. So veterans who are affected by post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, and other injuries, who are self-medicating, who are usually involved in nonviolent offenses, find themselves, rather than being cast into the criminal justice system, they are now in a position where they can receive care and alternative dispute resolution through these veteran treatment courts. That's good news, but more needs to be done. In closing, I want to make sure that you're aware of a program that we've just announced. Regulations just went on the street last week for the supportive services for veterans' families. This program is designed to provide a wide range of services, supportive services for veterans in need. It's a little bit different in that the services are not only for veterans, but they're also for their families. And that's unusual when we look at our range of services, because usually we're just focused on the veterans. But included in that range of services, local agencies are going to be able to apply for grants to provide, again, a wide range of services, including counseling on such things as foreclosure avoidance and meeting various legal needs in order to obtain local and state benefits, as well as federal benefits. So that's good news. We need all of you in operation. I'm just reminded of the story of the Starfish Thrower by Lauren Isley, where a person was walking along the beach and they saw a person off in the distance and they didn't know what they were doing. As they approached that person, they saw that this person was throwing starfish. And the person who approached the starfish thrower asked, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm throwing the starfish back into the ocean because the sun is out and the tide is going out, and if I don't do it, these starfish are going to die." Well, they said, "Well, there are miles of beach and there are starfish all along the way. You can't possibly make a difference." The starfish thrower simply picked up another starfish and threw it back into the ocean, and as it hit the sea, he said, "I made a difference for that one." We can all make a difference for that one And with the power of our organizations, we can make a difference for many. I urge you to be part of the solution. Thank you.
John?
Thank you so much, Professor Tribe, for everything you've done for access to justice. Your tenure has just been remarkable. We're all very grateful to you. And thank you, Will. Those were very inspiring comments. And thank you, David, for your service to our country and your willingness to make the effort to be with us here today and share your story.
Thank you.
We also thank the Legal Aid Society of Eastern Virginia and its Executive Director, Ray Hartz, for arranging David's participation with us here today. In my role as chairman of the Legal Services Corporation's board, I have come to see firsthand that LSC is at the center of one of our nation's great public-private partnerships. Established by an act of Congress in 1974 with a mission of promoting equal access to justice, Congress designated us as an independent, nonprofit corporation to distribute grants to 136 independent nonprofit legal aid programs in all 50 states. One of the most crucial ways we help ensure such access is through the grants we make to these 136 programs, close to $400 million in 2010 alone, serving more than 2 million low-income Americans. That makes LSC the single largest provider of civil legal assistance in the nation. Now, LSC encourages this network to seek innovative partnerships in the communities they serve to better leverage their federal grants. And through those efforts, our programs have more than matched their federal funds. The fight for equal justice, as you well know, is a call to our country to keep faith with its founding values. And I believe each generation has its own responsibility to the next generation to renew and strengthen those values. We cannot take those values for granted. Our grandparents, our parents, and our teachers taught us about fundamental fairness. Ultimately, that is what LSC's mission is all about. Now, I'm here today to talk with you about an innovative outreach effort that we believe will have a significant impact in the lives of our nation's veterans. Our veterans have defended and protected our most basic freedoms, and now it is imperative that we stand up for them. That's why I believe this special effort is so important. We're delighted to be working with the Department of Veterans Affairs to help make local vet centers aware of our services and to train those services about the legal services that are available through our clinics, sometimes just blocks away. Thank you, Will Gunn, for your support in this collaborative effort. Beyond the excellent counseling services that your centers provide the returning veterans, it is clear that for all too many veterans, another critical component is ensuring that they receive, through access to legal advocates, the fair treatment they deserve when confronted with housing, public benefits, consumer, and family law problems. As David has shown, this assistance can make a meaningful and lasting difference in the lives of our veterans. Although we've just embarked on this effort, it is my understanding that meetings between vet centers and LSC programs are already taking place throughout the country. Referrals for services are already happening. I am confident that these resources will be tremendously helpful to our nation's veterans. I also want to salute a number of our programs across the country that have established special veterans initiatives, such as the Bill Smith Homeless Veterans Project in Los Angeles, the Veterans Rights Project in Chicago. Our LSC-funded programs are also at the center of statewide collaborations designed to provide comprehensive services for veterans, such as the Kentucky Corps of Advocates for Veterans, created by the Legal Aid Society of Louisville. The Kentucky effort aims to help resolve veterans' problems in an organized and comprehensive way. We know that in addition to direct services, veterans will also greatly benefit from information, learning more about what special rights and programs have been put in place in recognition of their services. As LSC and its programs became aware of the legal needs within the veterans population, they found hundreds of websites marketed to veterans from a wide range of sources, but not one national website was designed to function as a clearinghouse of legal information or referral resources for service members, veterans, or their families. There also were no websites designed for advocates interested in providing high-quality legal assistance to veterans. Over the last 10 years, LSC's Technology Initiative grants have funded websites in every state to make important legal information and referral resources available to the public. In 2009, LSC made such a grant to Maine's Pine Tree Legal Assistance, who, in collaboration with the Arkansas Legal Services Partnership and an impressive group of consultants and volunteer advisors from around the country, began work with less than $300,000 in grant funding to address this compelling need. As the Vice President indicated, because of these efforts, we are very proud today to formally unveil the remarkable National Legal Information website they created, stateside-legal.org. I encourage all of you to visit this user-friendly website. One of the most important features of the website is its innovative search engine, which sorts helpful legal information and possible referral resources according to the topic, the individual's military status, and their state of residence. The website has been in a testing phase since June, but available to persons surfing the web. Without any publicity, the website has already drawn over 35,000 visitors from every state, signifying the tremendous need for such high-quality legal information. We think, well, that much of this early use of the website is directly related to our outreach and work with your vet centers. The combination of this website, our new working relationship with the vet centers around the country, and the consortiums being developed in a number of states reflects LSC's and its program's commitment to civil legal assistance for our nation's veterans. We are thrilled to be part of this new effort with the VA, and we are confident that these initiatives will do much to help those who have bravely served our nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David and Will and John. We have about 5 minutes for questions, if there are any, so please just identify yourself, and a mic will find itself to you. Right down here.
Verice Campbell, Deputy Director for the State of Nevada Foreclosure Mediation Program. Can you elaborate a little bit about the efforts that will be available for the veterans regarding foreclosures?
The program that I was referring to is called Supportive Services for Veteran Families, and it's a grant program for local agencies and organizations. The regulations were just published last week, the day before Veterans Day, November 10th, and the grants will be posted in the middle of next month. So more information to follow.
Of course, when we hear about foreclosure in the next panel, there may be some overlap. Other questions? Well, if I hear no other questions, yes, there is one here.
Terry Masherin, President of the Chicago Bar. Good to see a Chicagoan on the panel. John, are there things that Bar Association presidents can take back to our members that we can ask them to do to help with what LSC is doing?
First of all, they should turn on Stateside Legal right away. It's a remarkable website. I've looked at it a number of times myself. We won't test them on it, but you'll find it to be a very user-friendly site, and also there is a section, dedicated section, for those who are interested in advocating. But also, there are, as you know, for example, with the Legal Assistance Foundation of Chicago, it has a Veterans Rights Project, and look, we're going to make as much from our clinics around the country. Their outreach to the private bar and their work with the private bar has really helped across the country in carrying the caseload here. The load is heavy, and the clinics actually do know how to work with the private bar and engage them in those efforts. So I would suggest that local bar foundation heads be in touch with their legal services clinics in their area and offer to help.
Thank you. Other questions? If I don't see any, so I think I want to thank the panel and ask the foreclosure panel to come up. As the Vice President was leaving, I think he noticed that Bobby Scott was here, and I noticed that John Conyers is here. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you here, sir. And Maxine Waters has been recognized once, but she deserves to be recognized again. It's really hard to overstate the value and importance of a family's home. It's not only where we gather our loved ones, raise our kids, seek solace, find comfort, but it also plays an undeniably vital role in contributing to the middle-class status of America's working families. For many Americans, our homes represent not only familial stability, but financial stability as well. Our final panel today focuses on promising strategies to help families in financial distress explore alternatives to foreclosure. Federal, state, and local policymakers have initiated a wide array of responses to the nation's ongoing foreclosure crises. One vehicle that can usefully coordinate a number of foreclosure mitigation tools is mediation, wherein the homeowner and the lender actually sit down face-to-face with one another, generally with a third-party mediator present or at least available, and discuss the options available to save the home from foreclosure, something that is at least sometimes possible. Jurisdictions around the country are finding that well-crafted mediation programs can considerably decrease the number of defaults resulting in foreclosure and increase the likelihood that mortgage terms can be negotiated to keep families in their homes. As the Vice President pointed out, that's important not only to the family that doesn't end up losing its home, but it's important to surrounding families, to the value of property in the neighborhood, to the whole community. That's been the experience in Connecticut, which has the distinction of having the first statewide foreclosure mediation program, as well as in Cook County, Illinois, in Providence, and in the more than 20 jurisdictions that have made programs available to homeowners at risk of foreclosure, in some cases with housing counselors or lawyers available to assist homeowners at no charge. I'm pleased that representatives from several of these mediation programs are in the audience today. I wish I had time to mention them, but I'm afraid I don't. There is no magic bullet that'll solve the foreclosure crisis. We've got to study and evaluate what works best. But we are proud to announce today ongoing partnerships that will increase federal support for those creative programs, as well as enforcement actions to protect homeowners from those who would take advantage of their distress. We're joined today by 4 panelists. We'll first hear from Judge Annette Rizzo, who sits on Pennsylvania's Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia and is responsible for launching and overseeing one of the nation's first and most successful foreclosure mediation programs. I visited her program shortly after taking office at the Justice Department. It was an inspiring visit, and it encouraged me to think more broadly about the possibilities in this area, and I was inspired by how much she and her team have accomplished. Phyllis McHugh-Sheeman is here to share her experience going through the Cuyahoga County Foreclosure Mediation Program in Ohio, and to describe the ways in which the program and the assistance of a housing counselor from the NeighborWorks-funded Neighborhood Housing Services of Greater Cleveland had a profound impact on her family's ability to stay in their home. Helen Konofsky, the General Counsel at HUD, is here to describe federal efforts to increase homeowners' access to well-constructed foreclosure mediation programs by providing federally funded housing counselors and other forms of support, and by identifying strategies for effective mediation programs. I can't help adding that it's fun to have a former student of mine on the panel. I've got so many former students in this administration. It's quite exciting. Finally, we'll hear from the Honorable John Leibowitz, Chairman of the Federal Trade Commission, who will describe the work the Commission is doing to protect vulnerable homeowners from mortgage rescue fraud. So, Judge Rizzo, could you start us off by describing what your program has been able to do for homeowners in Philadelphia?
Build it, and they will come. So began my testimony before Senators Specter and Casey, who presided over a United States Senate Judiciary Committee hearing in Philadelphia back in the fall of 2008 regarding our diversion program. And when we commemorated our one-year mark in June of 2009, the mantra became, we built it and they came. We built it and they came. So to Vice President Biden, of course, and Professor Tribe, who's become my new BFF, and to all the distinguished panelists who preceded me, and also the podium I share now with our panelists today, thank you. Thank you for bringing real radar to a very important situation. About our program, in just about 7 weeks in the spring of 2008, the First Judicial District began this program. We brought together quickly all stakeholders to the issue: consumer and lender lawyers, the mayor, city council, OHCD, HUD supervised housing counselors, the Bar Association. We have Scott Cooper here from our bar. We appreciate it. Community outreach teams, all carrying the same banner, one mission: saving homes, one address at a time. The message was clear. No owner-occupied property could go to sheriff's sale without first going through a court-mandated conciliation conference between the parties, with the hope that the brief pause or the spur off the railroad track of litigation would divert the homes from sale. We have been in operation every Thursday for approximately 2.5 years. And as one of the only programs with statistics available on outcomes, our data shows that, in fact, the program has seen successes, with 75% of eligible homeowners in foreclosure participating in our program. We've scheduled over 13,000 cases in the program and have seen positive resolutions in approximately 35 to 40% of these cases, with a large percentage still in queue for negotiation. Preliminary data is also showing that of those borrowers who have reached agreements, a significant majority of them remain in their homes today, a very high percentage, and that's a very compelling figure with respect to any redefault considerations. I've often asked, what makes the program work? And I suggest to you it boils down to one core element, something you mentioned earlier today. It's all about the face-to-face encounter a lender, through their counsel, has with a homeowner. We provide a forum in which borrowers and lenders can dialogue on the reality of a particular homeowner's situation to bring about an attainable, and probably more importantly, sustainable solution to keep borrowers in their homes. It is a return to community banking principles where the banks knew their customers, and in effect, and I talk about it often, the George Bailey building and loan model. We leave nothing to chance in our program, and thanks to the efforts and support of our mayor, Michael Nutter, teams of door knockers go out each week, door to door, to alert residents as to the fact that they have a conference scheduled in our program and that help is available, in addition to, of course, PSAs, radio announcements, and other ads that go out throughout the city. Now, this is a program of responsibility, and homeowners are tasked with calling what's called the Save Your Home Philly hotline, and then gathering their financial documents so that their housing counselor can get a complete financial picture. The paperwork is then turned over to a lender, and negotiations begin. If a workout is not reached prior to the conference date the court schedules, then the homeowner, housing counselor, and lender counsel meet eyeball to eyeball in the courtroom. And you've seen the organized chaos of that to have the deal-making begin. Additionally, homeowners are eligible for pro bono representation at the date of their conference. And Philadelphia Volunteers for the Indigent Program has trained over 450 lawyers to serve our homeowners. In addition to certain lawyers which I actually picked to serve as judge pro tems or appointed counsel to oversee the mediations, they have in total given over $1.5 million back in pro bono services. We are, in effect, creating access to justice for thousands of individuals facing a seemingly hopeless situation. We are Civil Gideon personified. We commend recent creation of a federal program based on Pennsylvania's HEMAC program, the Emergency Program for Funding for Homeowners, which did infuse $155 million into Pennsylvania's efforts to stop foreclosure. This money will be critical to homeowners across the country and will become yet another tool in the arsenal to fight the fight for those homeowners who are facing foreclosure. As what I often refer to as second-generation issues, since we've been in existence some 2.5 years, we have identified specific demographics that need additional support to navigate foreclosure. And we continue to develop protocols for our senior citizens, folks facing mental health issues, estate claims, and fraudulent conveyance. Unfortunately, we're also seeing a significant rise in scam foreclosure services. And our program is ever vigilant on these issues, and we look forward to information later from our panelists on that very topic. We also are experiencing an increased delay in getting deals done due to the inability of lenders to react to proposals. The converse of delay caused by homeowners not being prepared with necessary paperwork, all of which results in increased arrearages, deterioration of property, and increased hopelessness of homeowners. While ramp-up of loss mitigation services has occurred in the lending community without proper training and best practices in place, in particular with document processing, we will lose precious opportunities to keep families in their homes and stabilize communities. At the end of the day, we're all working toward the same goals. Home ownership, as we all know, is an essential part of the American fabric and one we will continue to protect. And so I say to this very learned audience, who also can lend their heart, mind, and energy and service, may the force be with all of us in this endeavor. Thank you so much for your attention.
My name is Phyllis McHugh-Shimon, and I am here to tell you firsthand how the Cuyahoga County Foreclosure Mediation Program helped my husband Richard and myself keep our home. My family of 3 boys and 2 dogs live in North Olmsted, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland, where we live in our 3-bedroom ranch for the past 4 years now. I am an accountant, and my husband Richard was for many years a journeyman tool and die maker until he lost his job in March 2008 during the recession. After 7 months, Richard was able to find a job as an account manager for a landscape company where he's been for the past 2 years, although this is a seasonal position with a considerable downsize in pay. During the several months of my husband's unemployment, it became difficult to make our mortgage payments on my salary alone. Not wanting to lose our home, we contacted our mortgage servicer with the hopes of modifying our loan. We tried everything we could. We repeatedly tried to work out a modification with our servicer to no avail. I made repeated attempts to contact the company and provide the information it needed, but I was sent through a seemingly endless bureaucratic maze. I spent countless hours in the public library researching my options, and my husband and I even attended seminars and workshops on home loan modification. In the end, we received a letter stating that our request for modification was denied due to the lack of information and the servicer's inability to contact the borrower despite our numerous conversations with the servicer's representatives. We eventually received a foreclosure action filed in Cuyahoga County. In Cuyahoga County, whenever a lender files a foreclosure complaint, the homeowner receives a request for mediation form. Without much hope and feeling very deflated, we went ahead and requested mediation, thinking about no more than how long we had until we had to find another place to live. The mediation program changed our outlook and our fortunes. Our mediator, Andrea Canast, was very helpful, understanding, and compassionate while remaining neutral and even-handed. At one point during a particularly tense session, she even asked the servicers' attorneys to step out of the room so that I could compose myself. I was also provided with a housing counselor free of charge through the Neighborhood Housing Services of Greater Cleveland. Both Andrea and Darren Ham, our counselor, helped both me and my husband understand the process more clearly and explain what options were available to us. They also helped us communicate with the lender and made sure that they got back to us with the response. In the end, the mediation was successful. We were approved for a HAMP modification, and with the resulting reduced payments and my husband's new jobs, we have full confidence that we will keep our home. This would not have been possible without the Cuyahoga County Foreclosure Mediation Program, which provided us the space to study our options and, with the help of our counselor and the mediator, work out a solution that saved our home. Thank you for listening and for supporting working families trying to save their homes.
Well, thank you, Professor Tribe. I'm not sure how you follow that. Great job, Phyllis, really. Terrific job. And thank you, Judge Rizzo, for all that you do to make situations like this possible in Philadelphia and to set an example for things that we can do around the country. Thank you all of the distinguished guests who are here, and most particularly our committee sub-chair for Housing and Urban Development, Chairwoman Maxine Waters. We appreciate you being here and supporting all of these efforts, and most particularly our efforts with respect to the foreclosure issues facing the nation. As I saw in Philadelphia when I spent some time with Judge Rizzo, effective foreclosure mediation programs are built on the core principles of property rights and sanctity of contract, and above all, the dignity of the individual, individuals like Phyllis. Watching lawyers for servicers meeting face-to-face with borrowers on the brink of losing their homes, you can see the value of mediation in reminding both parties what's truly at stake in the proceedings. It's no longer about pushing paper or checking boxes. It's about people and the homes that they live their lives in, raise their families, and become members of their communities. Too often, there are better alternatives to foreclosure: modifications, forbearance, short sales, or even our own FHA refi program that get overlooked in the rush to foreclose. Mediation services to ensure that safeguards are in place to protect homeowners from unnecessarily losing their homes and to offer them relief through government programs for which they qualify need to be available for all. The Federal Housing Administration has historically provided such safeguards by requiring its lenders to determine whether deeds in lieu of foreclosure, pre-foreclosure sales, partial claims, assumptions, special forbearance, or recasting of mortgages are appropriate actions before even the beginning of foreclosure activities. As Judge Rizzo so powerfully explained, by allowing the parties to meet face-to-face to discuss possible mitigating measures, foreclosure mediation programs can eliminate a confusing servicing bureaucracy and allow parties to reach mutually beneficial resolutions, protecting the rights of homeowners and investors alike. And the programs underway have shown success in this regard. Of course, the most celebrated success is the large number of homeowners reaching settlements that allow them to remain at home. And we know some of our programs now are reaching a level of 60% success rate. In the course of settlement, eligible homeowners are also presented with an opportunity to assess their eligibility for federal, state, and local foreclosure intervention programs, ensuring that programs reach the people that they are intended to help. Because such a high percentage of mediation cases settle out of court, these programs can remove some of the burden this crisis has placed on our court dockets. But the success of these programs extends beyond settlement rates. Even for homeowners unable to keep their homes, mediation presents an opportunity for them to negotiate graceful exits, allowing homeowners to transition to more stable housing arrangements with dignity and allowing servicers to avoid costly foreclosure proceedings. Finally, successful programs do more than protect the rights of individuals. They help stabilize and strengthen entire communities. Everyone here understands that foreclosed and vacant homes have a debilitating effect on neighborhoods and often lead to blight, neighborhood decay, and reduced property values. As mediation programs across the country continue to grow and new programs emerge, we will see innovative approaches and continue to learn about the most effective means to protect communities and the homeowners who live in them by preventing foreclosures. Indeed, local programs across the country have already given us valuable early lessons about effective strategies. First, we know high-performing programs provide homeowners with access to well-trained housing counselors and attorneys who can help them gather documents, identify foreclosure prevention options, and facilitate communication among the homeowner, the mediator, and the lender's counsel. At HUD, we know about this good work that housing counselors do, and we recognize that our vast network of counselors is one of HUD's great strengths. This year alone, we are providing $87 million for housing and mortgage modification counseling, an increase of more than a third. Second, when planning new mediation programs involving all sides in the process, from courts to legislatures, from lenders to homeowners to advocates, helps ensure that programs are efficient, fair, and not unduly burdensome to any party. Third, ensuring a high level of home ownership participation is the key to success. And successful local programs have taught us the keys to this participation include community outreach and automatically scheduled mediation sessions. Finally, using pre-mediation conferences can ensure judges are called upon to address only the toughest cases, therefore decreasing the burden of mediation programs on the courts and keeping homeowners out of what can be long, costly, and often frustrating legal battles. For our part at the federal level, we need to support efforts that work. HUD is committed to a number of measures to do just that. We have teamed up with the Access to Justice Initiative to produce the Emerging Strategies for Effective Foreclosure Mediation Programs white paper. That report was posted this morning on HUD's and the Department of Justice's website and can serve as a resource to build on successes we have already identified. HUD will also continue to work with the Access to Justice Initiative to advance research and evaluation of mediation as a foreclosure mitigation tool. And because housing counselors are so important to successful mediation, HUD has recently provided program guidance on eligible uses of our community development block grant funds, clarifying that these funds can support housing counseling and that under the CDBG program, housing counselors can use foreclosure mitigation programs to assist the homeowners that they serve. HUD is reaching out to support mediation programs with a new training webinar that will highlight strategies and resources for avoiding foreclosure for homeowners, housing counselors, pro bono attorneys, and mediators. The webinar will particularly focus on understanding federal foreclosure prevention programs, including those available through HAMP and through FHA. We're proud of the work that HUD is doing to support foreclosure mediation, but we are not doing it alone. We have partnered with NeighborWorks America, and the Chief Operating Officer of NeighborWorks America, Eileen Fitzgerald, is sitting right back there. NeighborWorks is the largest single funder of foreclosure mitigation counseling in the country. NeighborWorks has created a foreclosure mediation workshop, which will debut next month in front of nearly 2,000 housing counselors at the NeighborWorks Training Institute. In addition, the $1 billion emergency homeowner loan program passed as part of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act that became law this summer will provide bridge loans of up to $50,000 to help families keep up with their home mortgage payments and avoid foreclosure while they look for work. Borrowers will be able to apply for those funds through NeighborWorks affiliates before the end of this year. And so to NeighborWorks and to all of you who partner with us in the fight against foreclosures, thank you. At HUD, we look forward to building on these efforts across the federal government and to continue to work with our local partners to protect the rights and integrity of homeowners, and while doing so, strengthening the communities we work so hard to serve. Thank you.
Well, let me start by thanking you, Professor Tribe, and also Vice President Biden and his staff for your terrific work in today's endeavor. Earlier today, you mentioned that President Roosevelt had signed the Fair Labor Standards Act into law 72 years ago. 66 years ago, President Roosevelt signed the GI Bill into law. And the American middle class was born, I think, really out of a government program that put millions of returning World War II veterans through school and into their first homes. 66 years later, unemployment, foreclosures, and financial scams threaten to shake our middle class apart. Sadly, a soldier returning home from Afghanistan today is as likely to find a notice throwing his family out of their house as he is a program putting his family into one, and that's despite almost superhuman efforts by many of the people in this room, and particularly HUD. And although there are many people in public service, and I think most of us in the room today, who strive to continue FDR's commitment to justice for the middle class, too many families feel abandoned by Washington, left to drown in a sea of bad guys and black hats. Now, at the FTC, we want to reclaim the white hat for the U.S. government. Today, we're announcing 3 ways we're ensuring that the middle class has access to justice to weather the foreclosure crisis. First, under the authority that Chairman Jay Rockefeller and Senator Byron Dorgan worked very hard to get for us, and they did work very, very hard, we are issuing a new rule that will shut down some of the worst actors of the foreclosure frenzy, and that is fraudulent mortgage rescue companies. Now, these scammers are often armed with official-looking documents and false claims of connection to government programs for homeowners, and they sell legal services that they can't and that they don't deliver on. They make promises that they can't and that they don't keep. Often, they charge fees in advance, but then do nothing. Or even worse, they tell homeowners not to pay their mortgages, leaving many consumers to lose their homes as well as their hefty deposits. Hundreds of thousands of Americans have lost hundreds of millions of dollars in precisely this way. And these scammers don't stop at stealing the fees from their victims. A homeowner waiting on the empty promises of a fraudulent mortgage rescue scammer may also miss the opportunity to save his or her home and credit record, which is equally important in some ways, by participating in one of the legitimate foreclosure assistance programs run by HUD, groups like NeighborWorks, or the programs like the one Judge Rizzo has authored and the one Ms. Shimon used. So the new rule we're announcing today is simple, effective, and straightforward. It stops mortgage relief companies from collecting any money before they deliver an actual loan modification. One that and it has to be one that the homeowner finds acceptable. We also require these companies to tell consumers what their services will cost and that they may not succeed in securing the promised relief. The companies have to disclose that they're not associated with the government or with the consumer's lender. And this is an enforcement tool with teeth. We don't generally have fining authority, but if the foreclosure rescue companies don't play by the rules, that is, if they violate our new rule, the FTC has the authority to go after them with hefty fines. And let me assure you, we're going to do that. Our second announcement today is about a few specific victories in our battle against mortgage scammers. In the past 2 years, the FTC has pursued more than 30 cases against mortgage rescue schemes at the national level, and with our partners, a bipartisan group of state attorneys general, we brought more than 200 cases. And by the way, Maxine Waters helped deliver one of those cases to us. She was very, very important in tipping us off about one of these mortgage scammers. This week, we were able to shut down the Residential Relief Foundation, which disguised itself as a government program, complete with a fake U.S. seal. And you can see back here, I don't know if you can see in the back, but they're using a U.S. seal to make it look as if they are part of the government. It looks very much like the seal behind Professor Tribe, which is, in fact, the seal of the United States government. Residential Relief charged homeowners thousands of dollars up front to get their mortgage payments lowered. The company, of course, didn't deliver. In fact, it callously tossed its clients' financial documents in public dumpsters, putting consumers at risk of losing their identities as well as their homes. Now, this week, a Baltimore federal court granted our request to stop this scam, issuing a preliminary order that freezes the assets of Residential Relief and appoints a receiver to take over the business. And for this, by the way, we owe a debt of gratitude to the Special Inspector General for the Troubled Assets Relief Program, also known as SIGTARP, which really helped tee this case up. So thank you so much for your work. Today, we're also announcing a major settlement with U.S. Foreclosure Relief, similarly titled but a different company, another malefactor that collected upfront fees falsely claiming that 85% of its clients received loan modifications and promising to refund the fees if they didn't provide the modifications. Most of U.S. foreclosure relief's clients got nothing, of course, no services, no mortgage modification, and no refund. Today's settlement changes that. U.S. foreclosure relief will pay homeowners $600,000 in redress and is banned from the mortgage relief business, not for a month, not for a year, but forever. And a final way we're helping homeowners through the current foreclosure crisis is by preempting problematic fallout from the robo-signing fiasco. As we all know, bad guys go where the money is, and there is no doubt that recent press accounts about robo-signings are going to be used to lure homeowners facing foreclosure into yet a new type of foreclosure scam. So when our rule goes into effect next month, our new rule will have an immediate effect of helping to stop these practices, hopefully before they happen. Let me just finish by underscoring what most of you in the audience already know. The FTC is a very bipartisan agency committed to standing by America's middle-class families. With the new rule and enforcement actions we've taken today, all, by the way, through 5-0 votes. So if you're looking for bipartisanship in Washington, the Federal Trade Commission is really one place where you can find it. We try to show our determination to ensure fairness throughout the foreclosure process and to punish wrongdoers. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for going a minute over my time. We're very busy. Thanks to those guys over there.
I think before I call for questions, and I'm sure there'll be a number given the importance of this topic, I want to just note a couple of themes that cut across everything that you have heard. It's very clear, especially in a period of financial stringency, that interagency partnership and partnership between the government and the private sector and community-based effort and synergy are the name of the game. We're not in a world where we can suddenly appropriate massive new funds to pour into the ditch that so much of the legal system has become. So the nature of the Access to Justice initiative very clearly has been to look for ways in which various parts of the government, and we've seen how diverse that array is, the Federal Trade Commission, the Veterans, Housing and Urban Development, the Labor Department, and if this were a somewhat broader event, we would be telling you what we're doing also with the Office of Violence Against Women and with HHS. It's been clear that only by reaching across bridges and looking for unexpected sources of support and cooperation that we've been able to move incrementally to fill what is an enormous gap. And it's important to remember that starfish story, one starfish at a time. Even if we can only save one home here, one veteran there, one victim of domestic violence here, the inspiration that all of that together brings is a powerful antidote to the sense of despair that otherwise may grip the country. So I'm especially grateful to all of the people who have come here today to share their experiences, because it is in that way that we see a whole so much greater than the sum of its parts. Now let me ask if there are questions for the foreclosure panel. I see a number of hands up. One right here, a colleague of mine, David Wilkins. I probably should not play favorites, but hey.
I'm David Wilkins, and I'm from Harvard Law School, and one of a great many people who are anxiously awaiting to welcome Professor Tribe home after he comes back from his wonderful service in government. My question is, as I understand it, one of the biggest impediments to negotiations on mortgages has been for homeowners trying to figure out who to negotiate with as the mortgages have been sliced and diced as they have. And I wonder how in your various programs you're addressing that issue.
I'll take a quick shot at it. The whole theme about the eyeball to eyeball is the fact that in Pennsylvania, half the jurisdictions are judicially driven foreclosures. So when I have a lender, when I have a lender counsel, I have a lender behind that. They are the individuals tasked with coming into the program in good faith, and what I say, being one bat phone call away from authority. So to date, I have not had to subpoena an actual lender, the body, into my room. And yet, we do continue our negotiations because the council dedicated to the program know they have to come with the authority. So they sort of cut through or pass through that black curtain or jump into the abyss and find that individual who's really going to have the authority to get the deal done in a timely way.
And let me just add that while that's always difficult, it is a little less difficult with FHA loans, which are the ones we deal with, since FHA bears the loss ultimately if there is a loss. We have rules that whoever actually is holding the security benefits from, because they get the benefit of our insurance, but the homeowners ought to be benefiting from as well. So we have very stringent requirements prior to foreclosure. I wish I could tell you that they're being followed, but we do have the rules, and we're working very hard to enforce them.
Yeah, and I would just add, so we do it in several ways, but two principally. I mean, one is we try to go after malefactors, so consumers aren't trying to give money to someone who's just going to take that money and run. It's an important part of what we do. And then we have a wonderful Office of Consumer and Business Education, and so we try to alert consumers to scams. Part of the way we do that is by partnering with state attorneys general. We've done joint announcements with the Treasury Secretary and with Eric Holder. I believe we've partnered with NeighborWorks, and we've given out a DVD in English and Spanish, and we've given out thousands, tens of thousands of copies of that. So we try to aggregate our limited resources in the way that gives us the most sort of bang for the buck.
Yes. Congressman Waters.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Congresswoman Maxine Waters. And I first want to thank these panelists. They're the only agencies and individuals standing between loss of millions of homes in this country and being able to save those homes. And I thank you very, very much for that. You need to have a big round of applause from everybody. Let me just say that we took the idea of the $1 billion for unemployed homeowners from Philadelphia. That's where that program originated. We're very appreciative for that, and we want it to be implemented very quickly. HUD for your counselors, but for those counselors, we would not have anybody out there really working on behalf of all of these homeowners. And FTC, thank you for moving so aggressively when we contacted you to deal with the scam artists who were ripping people off in the names of the president.
Yes, yes, we had posters. I think I sent you one of the vice president saying, if you need money for your vacation, come to us. We're giving you out stimulus money. It was unbelievable.
So the question is, yesterday I held a hearing, and I was pretty tough on the regulators because I said to Treasury and OCC, you have the power to fine. You have the power to bring actions against these servicers and others who are not following the rules under HAMP and other kinds of things. Do you agree that this would help you a lot if we could levy some fines and penalties against these servicers and these basically companies, these banks, that are not following the rules, and they're doing all these things that are being unveiled every day, such as the robo-signing, et cetera, and this document production in the absence of documents to prove where the title is. They just have companies that are producing them. We need to put them out of business too, but could we get some more help from our regulators? What do you think?
You're going to get me in trouble. Of course, and I hope they told you, because I didn't get a chance to listen to the hearing. I hope they told you that all of the banking regulators, as well as the FTC, actually John and I have spent a lot of time together, even just this week. HUD, along with our friends from Justice, and I see Tom Pirelli back there, really are working very, very hard to figure out how to do that in the most organized, directed, and productive way. And I really do think you're going to see action in the not-too-distant future.
Yeah, let me just add, Tom has been doing spectacular work in trying to coordinate the state and federal response. Treasury actually helped us out. SIGTARP is part of Treasury. They helped us out enormously with the case that we brought today. But I agree with you. I think finding authority is enormously important. The House would have given us finding authority in the financial reform bill. Mr. Conyer was very involved in that. And the Senate didn't agree, and so it came out at about 1 in the morning of the last night of the conference. But of course, finding is, you know, I don't know about the particular circumstances involving a particular matter, but finding authority is really important for deterrence, and it's really important to vindicate the rights of people who've been ripped off.
Well, I want to thank the panel. I know there are other questions, but and some even from members of Congress, but my boss has arrived. And I do want to just say a word of introduction because he has another appointment afterwards. And if there is a question, Congressman Conyers, I'd be happy to take it offline or have it transmitted to the Attorney General. We haven't always had an Attorney General who has been totally dedicated to the rule of law. We haven't always had an Attorney General who has been so deeply concerned with the gap in justice, both civil and criminal, that he's wanted to work with the President and the Vice President to create a completely new office to pursue justice. I'm glad to say we have such an Attorney General now, and I'm glad to say, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to introduce the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder.
Thanks, Larry. Thank you. Thank you. I see I'm having my usual magnetic effect here. People are fleeing the scene here as I come on. That's okay. That's okay. Well, good afternoon. Oh, come on, folks. Good afternoon. There you go. Thank you, Larry. It's an honor to stand with you and with so many committed leaders, advocates, and partners as we take a critical step forward in fulfilling our nation's promise of equal opportunity and equal justice. I want to thank Vice President Biden and Larry and the outstanding teams that they lead for their work in organizing this event and bringing us all together. And I want to thank each of you and all of our speakers, panelists for being here. I'm grateful for your willingness to share your expertise and your personal experiences, and I'm inspired by your commitment to the principles that define who we are and who we can be as a nation. Now, as you all know, and as you've heard this morning, across the country, too many homeowners now struggling to avoid foreclosure simply don't know where to turn for help. Too many soldiers are fending for themselves as they confront life-altering financial and legal difficulties. Too many workers who have been mistreated by their employers do not have the means necessary to access the legal assistance that they need to fight back. Now, for these vulnerable Americans and for their families and loved ones, we are here today. And for them, we must renew our commitment to closing, once and for all, what Larry Tribe has described to you as the justice gap. Now, of course, this problem is not new. In fact, generations of Americans have worked to overcome it. Nearly a century ago, Chief Justice Taft noted that, ashamed as we may be, equal opportunity had not yet been achieved in our nation's justice system. 50 years later, my most famous predecessor, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, called the justice gap, and I'm quoting, one of the most challenging problems confronting the legal profession, 50 years ago. And he offered the Justice Department's full pledge of cooperation in meeting that challenge. Well, today, that challenge remains. And today, the Justice Department's pledge lives on. In the early days of this administration, President Obama called for an aggressive and historic effort to expand access to legal services. And today's Justice Department is fully committed to answering that call. As a prosecutor and as a former judge, I know that the fundamental integrity of our criminal justice system and our faith in it depends on effective representation on both sides of the courtroom. And I am proud that for the first time in its history, the Department of Justice has an office dedicated exclusively to increasing justice, access to justice for all Americans, regardless of income and regardless of circumstance. Now, as you've heard, our new Access to Justice initiative has hit the ground running, pursuing an agenda that will help the growing number of poor and middle-class Americans in need of legal advice and representation. In addition to the breakthroughs announced this morning for foreclosure victims, for veterans needing legal services, and for workers with claims under the Fair Labor Standards Act and the Family Medical Leave Act, the Access to Justice Office is working to close the justice gap in many other powerful ways. Larry and his team have met with federal judges, with prosecutors, with defense attorneys, advocacy and policy organization, community groups, local and state representatives, and as you saw today, everyday people who need help and who need help now. They have identified and begun to implement projects that focus on community-based solutions. They have called for additional research on the most effective ways to deliver legal services and work to make these services more accessible for residents in Indian country and rural areas as well. They have sought to put rules in place to avoid worst-case scenarios when a lawyer cannot be afforded. And they are endeavoring to transform the civil legal aid system, one collaboration at a time. This work represents a new vision for our legal system and for our country, a time when people like Mitchell Green, David Jamad, and Richard and Phyllis Shimon can easily access quality, affordable legal services. An America where citizens in need can get the help that they deserve without having to wait and without having to worry longer than they should or sacrifice more than they can. But if that's going to be the American legal system of tomorrow, then there are goals that we must set, partnerships that we must forge, and commitments that we must make today. Now, I'm grateful that the President and Vice President, leaders like Larry Tribe and my fellow cabinet members and agency partners across the Departments of Commerce, Veterans Affairs, Labor, and Housing and Urban Development are moving us forward by launching and advancing the initiatives that you heard about this morning. With the strides that we have made and with the additional steps soon to come, I'm really confident that we can and will build a fairer and more effective justice system. But as Vice President Biden pointed out earlier, the problems that we face cannot be solved overnight, and they cannot be solved by government alone. By working together, I'm confident that we can make a meaningful and, in many cases, life-altering difference to people and families across the country. So let us seize this opportunity to return to the beliefs that guided our nation's founding. Let us come together to renew the strength of our justice system. Let us make the progress that we dream is possible and make the impact that our fellow citizens deserve. And once again, I want to thank you all for being here today and for the work that you do every day to strengthen our justice system and to empower your fellow citizens. Thank you very much.
I want to thank you all for your attendance, for your energy, for your patience, and for your commitment. And I want to wish you a happy afternoon and a great Thanksgiving.